Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver and my mission is to make you excited about organic Japanese green tea. And today what we're gonna dive into is in the world of Gyokuro, the so-called Emperor's Tea, or also called Jade Dew. This is a little bit more the proper kind of translation of the name of this tea, and what we're gonna talk about is the longest shaded and the highest priced green tea of Japan. So this is a leaf tea, and within the leaf tea, it is the most expensive. So how actually did Gyokuro evolve? So Gyokuro is a leaf tea, as I said before, it's a long shaded. Here we talk about 21 days. So it's one of the finest and sweetest teas, and this tea was invented in 1735 or discovered more by the Yamamoto Tea Company, and they were the first one to sell it then in Eto, the city which is now called Tokyo, and they founded this tea the first time. And then after some years of evolving and working around the taste, in 1741 it is said that Gyokuro hit the Japanese market, and since then was like really exploding in terms of sales with the highest class or with the high society, let's call it like this. And that's how actually this tea came quite in vogue. And today, nowadays, it's still common that some farmers, they battle each other against for the kind of palate of the emperor, because the emperor then chooses his favorite Gyokuro every year, and that's why several competition, or you talk sometimes, or you hear the name competition grade Gyokuro. This is exactly referred to the competition becoming the emperor's tea. But when we talk about Gyokuro, we talk a lot about sweetness. Sweetness is kind of the main trigger of this tea, or kind of the main description. Also, we refer to umami. Umami is the fifth taste which we have on top of the tongue. Some of us, they might, when they dive into first time into Japanese green tea, go a little bit more into the direction of, this tastes a little bit like seaweed, kind of sweetness, but kind of a very special and surprising taste. But when you're Japanese, this is a taste which you like a lot, especially in food you can find this. And for example, also in a tomato, when you bite into tomato, there's a slightly sweet and salty taste at the same time. This is actually umami. So you can try it also with something you find in every supermarket at home. Just go a little bit and dive into this. It's quite surprising if you concentrate on the taste, and umami is something Japanese people really like. And here, this tea is the one which triggers this tea, or this tea taste, or this taste in general, the most. Because the reason or why Japanese green tea is triggering umami so much is due to the fact that now with the shading technique, so this means covering the tea plants just before the harvest. Here we talk about 21 days, as I said before. This also increases the amount of theanine. Theanine is an amino acid, and often when you talk about sweet and like astringent green tea, then people shifting often into theanine-rich tea, amino acid-rich tea, shaded teas. This is a little bit more the sweeter area of Japanese green tea, and there where we find the highest amount of theanine. So this reduction of the bitter taste, this you find the most in Gyokuro, where the theanine is the highest for a leaf tea. For high-grade matcha or ceremonial matcha, it is actually the same story. The longer they are shaded, the longer the shading period actually is, then the tea gets sweeter and sweeter and less astringent. So this is something which is quite interesting, because not only does theanine become, through the sunlight, catechins bitter or astringent parts, but it also increases the theanine part, lowers the catechins, so lowers the bitterness, and the theanine covers also taste-wise a little bit the astringent tones of the tea, so you kind of have a double sweet effect. Let's call it like this. Good. So when we go into Gyokuro, as I said before, I'd like to talk a little bit about sweetness of tea. So sweetness is a very important part of Gyokuro. And what also is important to know is when you brew a green tea, the higher you grow in temperature or how you go in temperature, if we talk about, for example, 80 degrees Celsius, 176 Fahrenheit, there we push quite good the catechins and a little bit more bitter parts, a little bit more chlorophyll, a little bit more veggie parts out. While when we go down with the temperature, then we stop, or we kind of lower the release of these catechins, so of the astringent parts of the tea, and the tea becomes automatically more sweeter. So if you have a tea at home and you say, ooh, this one is a little bit too bitter for me, try maybe go down to 140 Fahrenheit and 60 degrees. This could help just for you to enjoy the tea much more, because when you're going on the lower end of the scale of the hot scale, let's say it like this, then you definitely trigger more the sweet parts of the tea. And why is that? So the reason is that the water solubility of theanine, so the extraction of theanine, happens much faster. That's why also when you do a cold brew or a very low or room temperature brewed green tea, then you extract much more the sweeter particles, so the theanine goes into the water and the catechins cannot follow too much. So you trigger, or you really push the sweet part, and the more you go up with the temperature, you also have the theanine coming out, but the catechins also joining them, so you have much more of a astringent taste profile. And that's why also with the Gyokuro, it is important that you brew it at a lower temperature. Normally it is set between 50 to 60 degrees. This is a very common brewing kind of temperature. Meanwhile, often you see 70 to even 80 for a sencha. Me, myself, I like 6 degrees also for sencha, because exactly of this effect that it triggers more the sweet part, the more the sweet taste part of the tea. That's why I like to brew all of my teas around 50 to 60 degrees. 60 degrees my absolute favorite temperature. And this is what I will do as well with this Gyokuro tonight. And I will just brew this in my standard Japanese green tea. Sometimes when you talk about Gyokuro, you hear about Shirobidashi or the Huhin. These are teapots which are quite dedicated for Japanese green tea, especially Gyokuro. Here I have just a standard Fukamushicha teapot, so you can see it is actually quite big, the strainer which is inside. So this is one I'm testing out at the moment, and I will use this one here to brew my Japanese green tea, my Gyokuro. So this is a blend which I brought tonight, so you really can see the dark color of this tea. Very impressive how dark the leaves can become. And this is a mix of Samidori, Okumidori and Yabukita. And it is coming from the south of Japan, from Mr. Sakamoto, quite a famous farmer in the south, and it's around 5 grams, which I will use. Now I preheated the water as well, so the water is at 60 degrees Celsius, and I'm just gonna brew it. And important is, or what I suggested to do, is also to try out a little bit of different quantities of water. In Japan, often Gyokuro is drunk with a very small amount of water, and this is exactly what I will do. I'll just put in around 30 milliliters of water, 30 to 40, and then I let it brew for 2 minutes. Also for Gyokuro, when you talk about brewing time, there we talk about a little bit of prolonged brewing time. Normally sencha, you do it from 1 to 1.5 minutes. This is a very, very fair and very good temperature for a sencha. For Gyokuro, we talk a little bit longer, because we want to really see also evolve the tea leaves, because they're quite close, they're very nicely rolled, and also the theanine gives a little bit nearly of a sticky kind of a texture, kind of candle-like feeling of the needles. So it's just needs a little bit more time to unroll. That's at least my personal theory about Gyokuro. And really, the leaves are tightly rolled, and the leaves are kind of sticking a little bit together, and therefore needing a little bit more time just to unroll. What you can also do is, as you're using a little amount of water, just to preheat the teapot. This is also a good way that you can start with Gyokuro, just to keep the temperature at a very nice level, especially when you're using a little water. This can cool down quite a bit, so try to preheat your teapot. Just throw in a little bit of hot water, leave it in for 15 seconds, just put it in a glass or something, and then use your teapot directly. This is something I haven't done now for brewing my Gyokuro. So as soon as the leaves are quite open, as soon as the leaves you think they're quite good, so then you are able to take it out. And what is impressive after is that also due to the lower temperature, this tea is going to be very, very strong. It's sweetness and also savory part. If you're starting with Gyokuro, I suggest you to give a little bit of more water, just to keep in the hydrating, or give in the hydrating space as well. And also it lowers a little bit the strength of the umami, which can be quite overwhelming in the beginning when you're starting your journey with Gyokuro. So let's see. As I said, a small amount of water I used for this one here. So I tried to get out all of the tea. So I move down, up, just to get out everything. Let's have a look at the leaves. So we can see the leaves quite nice in terms of openness. They still can open quite a bit, so you can really do several brewings with this one here. Good, so let's go and have a taste. So when we smell at the leaves already, very sweet corn, a lot of savory taste profile, kind of a mix of grass, sweet, a little bit of a fresh citrusy note I get as well. This is quite nice. So I'm expecting a sweet tea. Let's have a sip. Smooth, dense, beautifully gliding over the top of my tongue. There's a little bit of kind of this sweet. It's so funny actually how umami really tastes like. It's kind of this mix of this jumping around between a little bit of a very sweet, fruity flavor profile mixed with kind of nearly a saltiness, which you get a little bit of this kind of seaweedy, kind of light. I think even if you eat the sea. Kind of seaweed salad, when you just taste it, you have this a little bit refreshing hint of seaweed with it, but it's not strong at all. But there's kind of a savoriness. You see, kind of, it is a little bit salty but sweet at the same time. It's very, very impressive how kind of different facets of taste can switch between each other in such a small amount of time. And what is also nice about Gyokuro is that it actually stays a long time in your palate, and it can really give you an aftertaste for a long time. So this is something quite impressive. I need to get a little bit of a toasty flavor on the top of the tongue just for a short time. So very, very beautiful. This tea, I just give it a second brew. I'm curious. As it's evening, this tea is quite strong, so please forgive me to not drink everything. So maybe the god of tea is watching me as well and is saying, oh, what are you doing? But this tea is quite potent. So if you're doing an evening session like I do here, maybe what you can do is actually to brew it cold. I did once a video about this. Did you just cold brew it for a longer time, and then you can even drink it in the evening. But here, as I'm on the hot water, I prefer not to drink everything, just to not stay awake all night. Good. So 30 seconds now the second time. You can do it much. I used a little bit more. So you can see also already the tannins are releasing themselves a little bit, smaller protein parts, but mostly the theanine, sorry, not the tannins, the theanine is releasing. And you can see that it gives a slight milky tone to it, much greener now. What happens sometimes when you're using a tea bag, if you're an absolute fan of tea bag drinking and just from some time to time you like to discover a little bit of higher quality teas, it can be that you have kind of a little bit more of a foamy or white foam on the top of the tea. This is nothing which is kind of dangerous. It's just the fact that you have the theanine concentrated in the hot water and it's just released stronger at the same time. And here in this case, it gives the milky color to the water of the Gyokuro. So let's see. Now, first maybe a small sniff of the leaves. A little bit more green. Seems a little bit astringent now, so it's pretty funny. So the leaves, they kind of give me a kind of a citrusy, refreshing note. A little bit of this toasty flavor I get. These are also a little bit more mature leaves, so there can be a little bit more of a softness, more of softness in the leaves. Gyokuro, a green tea which is also evolving over time and getting better and better with the age. It is said that Gyokuro is the best after 3 years after harvest. So this one here is like 1.5, close to 2 years. Now that I'm using more water, so it becomes softer, not so strong on the umami note, very soft and sweet still at the same time, very fruity. And now I get, so kind of when you drink the Gyokuro in a small amount of water, you really have this kind of quite direct play of umami flavor, this savory and sweet note. Here, when I drink it now with a little bit more water, that then I get a little bit more kind of this delayed savory sweetness kicking in. And in the beginning, it's kind of a smooth kind of experience of the tea, more on the sweet side, a little bit showing the grassiness is showing a little bit up, but then the savory taste profile really kicks in, and I have again a very similar experience to the first one, not as strong in terms of intensity, but still quite as intense that I can feel it very, very well in my palate. So this umami kind of savory, sweet taste sensation doesn't go away. I think you can go with small amounts, you can even go to 5, 6 times 6 brewings. It is said that versus the end you can go up a little bit with the temperature just to release all the different flavors and maybe even get a little bit of astringency, but this is completely up to you how you prefer your tea. So this was now my little session of Gyokuro. I hope you liked it. I tried to go a little bit deeper, a little bit, give you a different aspects and why Gyokuro can have this kind of a more sweet and savory taste profile, and really try to explain a little bit around why the sweetness is especially prominent and dominant in the Gyokuro. So I hope I could make you this a little bit more clear and a little bit show you what you can expect once you dive into the world of Gyokuro. So let me know what maybe your first experience was in Gyokuro. Just write something in the comment below. If you have a question, please do not hesitate to ask me.